Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's HDI webcast, Framework Fusion, ITSM, DevOps, and You, brought to you by CA Technologies. I'm Roy Atkinson, and I will be your moderator today. We just have a few announcements before we begin. First of all, just a little bit of logistics for you. If you experience any difficulty with the webinar itself, you can get help by clicking on the green question mark at the bottom of the screen. That will give you a connection with our staff in the background, and they will help you out. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the webcast. Click on the red QA button and just type your question into the Ask a Question area below the video window, and then click Submit. Easy enough. And at this time, we do recommend that you disable your pop-up blockers because there will be some pop-up windows for you as we go through today's webinar. To chat with others who are attending today, click on the group chat button at the bottom right of your screen. We love having you exchange information and ideas during the webinar. And if you put some questions in there, we'll try to answer them as well. But if you have questions for the presenters, please do use the Q&A function. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event, and you may download a copy of the slides by clicking the Download Slide button located below the presentation window. That's a frequent question, so make sure that you can see where that is. We also have some resources available for you. If you're experiencing technical problems, visit the Help Guide by clicking on the Help link below the media player. In addition, you can contact our technical support helpline, which is also located in the webcast Help Guide. You can connect with HDI on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and certainly on HDIConnect.com, where you can read a blog, ask a question, or find a solution. And we ask you to visit HDI Connect early and often. Come see what there is to see. There's lots of information up there for you, and we'd love to connect with you there. Before we begin today's webcast, we decided to get a little bit of information from you, so we're going to have a brief poll. So we'd like you to tell us who you are aligning, how you're aligning, how your organization is aligning, with what frameworks are you using? Are you using ITIL, HDI Support Center Standard, COBIT, ITSM other than ITIL, ISO IEC, or DevOps, or some other type of framework that you're using in your organization? So select one or more of those. Since we're talking about Framework Fusion today, we're hoping to see that some of you are selecting more than one. And we'll give you a few seconds to answer that, and then we'll move on. It'll be very interesting to see the results here. Okay, going to move ahead. And we have the results. There we go. Most of you are aligning with ITIL. No big surprise there. Great proportion of you using the HDI Support Center standard, which does, in fact, dovetail very nicely with ITIL. COBIT, about 10%. Other than ITIL, about 10%. ISO IEC, about 15%. And DevOps, 20% of you are already involved with using DevOps. That's certainly a growing thing, and that's one of the big topics we're going to talk about today. Okay, great. Thank you for answering the question. So to talk about all of these things with us today, we have Rob Stroud. And Rob is no stranger to me. We've been friends for quite a while through the ITSM community. He's the International President of ISACA, formerly known as the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, in case you were wondering what that acronym stood for. He's the VP of Strategy and Innovation at CA Technologies. Rob spent more than 15 years in the finance industry, successfully managing multiple initiatives in both the IT and retail banking sectors related to IT service management and process governance. If you want to know about governance, in other words, Rob's the guy to talk to. He joined CA Technologies from the Australian computer security company Cybec, where he was responsible for the company's successful global expansion, including entry into the North American market. He's been a frequent speaker at HDI conferences and events, as well as a contributor to the blogs on HDI Connect. He's a highly respected leader in the service management community, and we're very glad to have him with us today. Welcome, Rob, and you can take it away.
Thanks, Roy. Thanks, listeners. I'm really pleased that you're all with us today. It's great to be here and great to talk about a topic dear to my heart, which is DevOps, ITSM, and, of course, you and your role. You know, it's one of the interesting things that I think and I really see in the industry today is we're at a point in time where innovation is moving quickly and technology is moving quickly. And all of us have a large amount of what we now call technical debt in our organizations. We all have systems and technologies that we're running and are doing the job, but the reality of it is they're not easily supportable in the new world. This leads us to a situation where there are issues today with speed, quality, and cost. You know, one of the things I hear from the development organization is I spend too much time waiting. I'm waiting for ops to get my change to production. The change process is too complex. You know, our test systems don't reflect production. You know, people are constantly fighting nightmares. And then operations are continually complaining about how they get changes across from development organizations. This is a problem where we've almost got this wall, this horrible wall between development and operations, yet we all work for the same company or the same organization. Our objective is all the same. And it's a challenge and problem that we've had for as long as I've been in the business of IT, which is now almost 30 years. You know, from a business perspective, it's a really interesting world. You know, they will tell us that IT doesn't understand business priorities. They're not often responsive. You know, often projects are over budget. Why are our projects over budget? Why are they over cost? Why are they not delivering functionality? And I hear from a lot of people that the default answer from everyone to everything, every request is no, or next year, or it'll take time. And interestingly, in the business world today, we're starting to see a prevalence of this thing called shadow IT, where business is going about it themselves. They're implementing technology stacks themselves. They're acquiring platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, everything as a service, just to bypass IT. That leads us to interesting exposures and operational risks, security risk, governance risk, compliance risk. But that said, sometimes it's the right answer in this environment where we need to get faster. So the fundamental conflict that's been around for years is even getting faster today. The business and development want faster innovation. They want code streaming. They want easy access. They want to be able to deliver agilely. They want to do far more releases. And they really want to just drive productive systems into production. At the same time, if we're in operations, we've spent years mastering the aspects of quality, consistency, integrity, and availability. We've been working on that to deliver the right things. We really want to act as one. We really need to act as one and drive innovation through. So acting as one means that we need to merge this development and operations. We need to overcome this divide. And as in the survey that we had earlier, we identified that 20% of you are already looking at DevOps or using DevOps. And the concept here is how do we get change to production quickly? How do we drive value? How do we not impact our operational systems? How do we indeed change the cadence in which we deliver? If I go back to the early days of DevOps, and the history of DevOps, which you can see here, one of the interesting concepts here is that you can see that this push to be agile, this push to be nimble, this push to change things a little bit more incrementally rather than at once, started with the Agile Manifesto way back 15 years ago. You know, it's not new, and it's taken about 10 years to really get into development, where we've moved from waterfall to governance now to agile with Scrum and Kanban as development methods being used today, to now being some impact in operations. You know, the early days of DevOps, I love quoting Cameron Haight, who works for Gartner, and Cameron will tell you that in the early days, DevOps was called no ops. It was a movement to get rid of operations, get operations out of the way so we can do the work of doing the work. That's a really interesting proposition. But the reality of it is that if we just do the work and don't take all the considerations into account, we end up in a situation where we're not delivering the value back to the business ultimately, because lots of changes are fine, but if the systems don't have integrity and availability, it's really just change for the sake of change. So we need to kind of overcome both problems at once and both issues at once. But we all do have the one objective at the end of the day. At the end of the day, we all want to deliver business because that's what we're here for. We're here to drive business change, and if you're in the insurance and banking industry, which I was in for many years, you want to deliver the ability for customers to get their money, give you their money, get mortgages, and of course all the other new processes that banking does today. IT doesn't want to stand in the way, but we want to deliver the capabilities the business needs in the time the business needs. And that's a really great objective. The reality is often we get so caught up in our processes and our tasks and activities that we actually forget the bigger objective. So if you look at the areas in terms of what we want to do here, we all want to improve the business value of the work done within IT. We all want to deliver measurable business value through continuous and high-level service delivery. That's not anybody in ITSM, that is everybody in ITSM's objective. Every one of you that I ask, do you want quality deliverables? You want to deliver consistently. You want to meet service levels. You are not in the role to break systems. You actually want to deliver change. But we come from a heritage where technology used to break a lot. Remember I talked about technical debt up front. Systems we had in the past broke more easily, weren't as agile, weren't as malleable. Today, we can change things rather quickly. We really want to break down the barriers between development and operations. We want to act as one, be one business, and we've been talking about it since ITIL version 1. We want to break down the barriers so that we can all act as one. And DevOps is one of the approaches that allows us to do that. So what we need to do in DevOps is not decompose operations, but change the way we work together, to change the way in the flow of work to streamline the business that we deliver. So one of the definitions I have for DevOps, and there are many, and one of the things about DevOps is it's not a framework like ITIL. It's not a framework like COBIT. It's not a standard like ISO 20000 or 27000. It's a philosophy. It's a mindset. It's a culture. So I like this definition: methods for improving communication, integration, and collaboration between development and operations, or methods for delivering high-value services in the business-appropriate time frame with the total collaboration and working together between development and operations. Two definitions, same thing. The objective here is to drive business value and drive delivery. We want to do it in a continuous release methodology. We want to change incrementally, and we want to actually deliver smaller change. So you look at this diagram here. So you look at this in terms of notions of what we're doing. Somebody wants a product and there's some sort of product discovery. You define the product, you develop the product, you deliver the product, and you put it into operations, and it's good to go, right? Well, that's the old way in doing things, a total waterfall methodology that takes some time to deliver. Now, if you look at how we want to do today and how we want to change, mobile apps are a great example. If you think of a mobile app and you think of the way they're used today, mobile apps change frequently. User requirements change, we incrementally add value. So if you look at that and you look at the methodologies for that, one of the pieces you're going to be doing today is you're going to be looking to define your overall projects, you're going to deliver incrementally, and what you're going to start doing is looping through. You're going to start having iterative loops in terms of how you do it. So you're going to be in operations, you're going to do a change, you're going to deliver some more product, you're going to go to operations. You're going to start delivering velocity. You're going to start changing more frequently. And some great methodologies that we'll talk about to do that later are Scrum and Kanban. And we've seen Kanban used in operations for many years. Since I first started my first ITSM implementation, we used Kanban for problem management. And the reality of it is it's a great methodology for getting your ideas, grouping your ideas, and then structuring them into deliverables. Scrum, of course, is a development methodology where you go and you leverage your requirements and your deliverables. You give each of your requirements a score, and then according to sprints, you will deliver part of them. And if that release is good enough to deliver business value, you'll pop it into operations. This is the cadence we need to go at today. We need to be doing more consistent and continual change. At the same time, we can't sacrifice quality of our work, and that is a key aspect of going forward. So if you look at GitHub and social coding, right, one of the things they talk about in terms of their agenda, no more meetings, no more work tasks, no more work hours, no more vacation tracking, no more expense audits, no more dress code. Well, I don't know about no more HR. But the reality of it is that if you look at the coaching there, it's about gathering the collective wisdom and objectives of the group and bringing them together to deliver the business outcome, as I talked about before. So how do you get there? How do you actually deliver it? How do you change what you're doing? Well, a great example is the 9 dots puzzle. Draw 4 lines through here to touch every dot. Now, I don't know about you, but I'll sit here and play around for a while and use the dots as a boundary. Well, what about if you don't use the dots as a boundary? What about if you consider going outside the box? If you consider extending your lines beyond the realms of the box, you can actually hit every line. So your 9 boxes, you add these 2 imaginary boxes on the outside, and you can easily get through all the 9 dots in once. It's a real interesting challenge and change. You need to think about the problem differently. And at IT Service Management, we've thought about change management the same way for years. You go, development develops, suddenly they decide they do a request for change, they put that change in the system, we have a change advisory review board, the change advisory review board decides whether the change can go to production or not. We sit there and wait for an appropriate release. We tell the developer to come in on a weekend and sit with the release. We implement it into production. It fails. We back it out. We do the whole thing all over again. Imagine if you did better testing on the process on the way through. Imagine if you integrated all the components. Imagine if you backed out at went to production. But more importantly, your change was more incremental in terms of size. The less you change, the easier it is to increment to production without major impact on production. And this is one of the thoughts of DevOps. By changing releases to smaller chunks, smaller pieces, you actually are changing less, therefore you incrementally change and you can roll it out to production. So we come up with a model, assume, plan, and check. So let's look at this model in terms of how we go and deliver. So the first thing we're going to do is the doing part of this is the bit between plan and check, and you're going to adjust the way you act. So let's assume you've got a new change, you're going to put it into production, you plan for it, you do the coding, and then you do a testing phase. You do that testing phase and you find an error, so you adjust, you go back and do some more. As you go through the next phase, you go and you implement production, and you find a good idea. Oh, the screen should have been red instead of blue. We've missed a feature. We've missed a capability. We've missed a deliverable. So you go back and reiterate your assumptions again. And you do this as a team, as a working group. And what you end up here is with an iterative life cycle. So what we really want to do is accelerate the plan and do and check piece. We want to accelerate that and really drive that life cycle more frequently. So one of the things I advocate with DevOps is more frequent change. And we'll touch on why ITSM is critical to that going forward. But the reality is if you look at this more frequent change, you're going to have to start to test your assumptions. And one of the misconceptions of DevOps is we don't test. The converse is true. In many DevOps sites, you build your test script and your testing scope before you actually do the change, because you know what the areas you're going to impact is, and you understand those and you document those. And that's a key part of the changed world. So no, we're not reducing the level of testing, the level of coding, the level of thought, we are reducing the level of complexity. But we're instrumenting or automating that complete release cycle as we go to production. One of the global use cases besides Netflix and others for DevOps is Amazon. And velocity at Amazon is really well understood. There's some great videos on YouTube you can look at as well, and there's a link in this slide to one. If you look at that, they have a maximum deployment of 10,000 an hour. One of the reasons they have such huge success is because they actually do small incremental change. They're not trying to change the world at once. They change the world one change at a time, one incremental change at a time. And if you think about it, it's really about more frequently changing. You know the test scope, you know the impacted areas, you can put it through an automated test suite. And by the way, when you're good at DevOps, you automatically promote the change to production. If it's a low-risk, low-impact area, you're going to allow that change to continue right through the life cycle, and it might be untouched. You know, this is where governance and compliance, and 10% of you identified you're leveraging COVID. But if you've got an appropriate governance regime in place that's doing good governance, you're going to understand the risk and impact of the area of change that you're doing, and you're going to identify that demand by risk and impact to the business. And you're going to actually determine whether something can go through a DevOps process or a traditional waterfall process based on risk and impact to the business and the type of change. If it's a mega change, you're probably going to put it through a process of waterfall with significant extra testing and things like that. The analyst, one of the analysts now described this as bimodal IT. So one of the propositions I'll make to you right now as we get into the second part of the session is I am not advocating that you just go and throw traditional implementations of IT service management or governance or compliance away. No, that's wrong. What you're going to do is you're going to do better curation of the demand request up front, and that will help guide you into which process you follow. Does this code line go through a DevOps process? Is it innovation? Is it net new? Is it low risk? Or is this something traditional, a major system we're upgrading, a major change, major impact, major risk? We probably want to go through the traditional processes to solve that one as we move forward. So let's look at the concept of DevOps, you know, and the value of it as a philosophy. Well, first, operations development are going to have to talk. They're actually going to have to communicate, sit around a table, and determine how they deliver the change. Wow, that's you know, I remember being and running the change management division at a bank, and the only time the developers talk to me is when they call me and say, "Hey, Rob, why is my change in tonight? Why did you move it out?" The reality of it is, if you sit down with them and become part of a single team, and this is where DevOps teams come together, you actually put your operations people, your security people, your compliance people, your testing people, everybody becomes a part of a virtual team, forming one collaborative team. This is a culture change, an organizational change. And this is one of the areas that we really need to understand. Because what we're going to do is transform the way we deliver service. And in ITIL, we talk about, you know, the service process, the process of building services. And one of the things we have to do is actually look at that book that talks about service transition and the delivery of service delivery packages and actually work out how we're going to build them. And build them as a team together collaboratively and test them through the process. And then what we're really looking to do is accelerate value. Accelerate those changes we can give, because your competitors are not slowing down. They are going faster. They are going at the speed of IT. They are rewriting technology and business process on a daily basis. And that's one of the things we have to do. But at the same time, and you know, there's been a lot of hacks in the news lately, and if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that I've been retweeting a lot of them, is we can't sacrifice security and compliance. And for my dear operation friends, we can't sacrifice performance either. Therefore, it has to be an integrated group with the right business objectives identified up front. If we don't identify the business objectives up front, we end up in a situation where we are just delivering change for change's sake, as I said earlier in this session. So let's look at collaborative service delivery. let's look at working this out together. Because one of the interesting aspects as we look at this is you start thinking it through. Well, we've got requirements. We get our architecture team in place. We look at how it conforms with the organizational architecture. We start with that. If we're doing Agile, we get our Scrum and Sprint teams together. We do some unit testing, some system testing. We accept it. We deploy it, right? That's a great process, and it's stable in production. We've got operational input and awareness. Well, we actually have to start changing that cycle. So if you look, you've got these two barriers on the top half of this graphic where you've got them as totally separate processes or functional lines. We have to start bringing these together. And this is the concept of DevOps. And those who are doing DevOps well are doing this today. Requirements are done with architecture. We're looking at the operational requirements, the operational inputs, the operational expectations, all at the beginning of the life cycle, and we're consistently reviewing and continually looking at these on the way through. We're learning on the as part of the process. And that is the key aspect. We have to learn. We have to learn and continue and grow our knowledge base. So Agile Development is the norm, and I love doing this. Some of you may not be using Agile Development, but the reality of it is that in an Agile Development environment today, one of the ways it operates is that you get a backlog of requirements from the user, a backlog of things that the user community wants. You go and maybe do ethnographic analysis of your user community and what they need and how they're going to use technology. And you're going to form a backlog, and you're going to rate the backlog items. You're going to give the backlog items what we call a number of feature or function points. Those feature or function points will be prioritized for the business, and then they'll form a backlog, and you'll put those backlogs into releases based on business priorities. And the interesting thing about Agile is you might say, oh, we've got a few cycles left here. Let's slip in another feature or two. Now, these cycles will go 1 to 4 weeks usually, and at the end of that, you'll sit down and you'll have done the whole life cycle beginning to ending, including unit testing and system testing. And if the business says you have something potentially shippable, you'll probably ship it. Now, each day you review it in a Q&A process. They call it a daily stand-up in most Agile methodologies, where you're sitting together as a team. And by the way, the daily stand-up in most good organizations is a 15-minute meeting where you stand up. You actually don't sit down around a chair. You stand up, you collaborate together. And the other thing about Agile Development is very often you'll swap roles within the team as well from time to time. But more on that in an Agile discussion. But I think it's a really interesting approach because you look about the way we build service design packages in operations today, those of you using IT Service Management, ITIL, or another ITSM methodology. If we build service design packages today and we put them together, you're effectively doing the same thing. You're getting a backlog of items from development and other external forces. You're prioritizing those. You're building them, putting them together, testing them, and then potentially shipping that code. The critical aspect in all of this is automation. And if you look at this, and this is where the value of DevOps is key. In DevOps, one of the things we can do is take manual processes and instrument them and automate them. And I like this idea. You've got the infrastructure, the application, and the service piece. And if you look at the way you build things today, in the infrastructure piece, we've become very good in operations at our network automation, at our server automation, our storage automation. We're doing it at a siloed level. Imagine if you can start to bring these pieces together and instrument them and automate them at a single level, almost as a service. It's been an objective we've had for many years, but now is the time we can do it. We've reached a level of instrumentation and programmatically do it. At the same time, we're going to match that on the outside to your capacity management and the automation of your configuration. As you can see, as you do that up the top, you're going to actually deliver your user community, which you do, a self-service catalog. Many of you have already implemented that in your ITSM implementations, and well done. The reality of it is, though, as you start to look at all these pieces working together, you're going to start to automate all these pieces together. And one of the secrets of a true DevOps environment that's successful is you're automating these pieces together in terms of the package going through the life cycle. You're actually going through, and when the code is developed or finished in the team, you push it to unit test, which is an automatic life cycle, which then pushes it to systems test, which pushes it to user acceptance testing, which then goes and pushes at director operations. And if you understand all those components and you've leveraged production-like environments in the back end, and I said production-like, by the way, then you can actually have a good image of production and move it straight through. You can have services identified that can go straight into the service catalog as requests. You can then instrument and automate those services. And that is the actual panacea in this integration with service management and DevOps, and even governance processes like COBIT and other frameworks. You actually want to automate this process. Imagine the day when you can instrument your end-to-end change. All the audit checkpoints are done because you've automated all the processes. It writes all the audit flags. If they're all there, you can backtrack. And by the way, before you go to production, it does a backup of production. You're all good. Even if you have a failover, you have a failure. You can see the situation, back out, the teams together. You can quickly correct it, quickly put it through the test process, and quickly go back to production. Not all change is successful, by the way, even in a DevOps environment. The reality of it is, because you remove complexity, you actually increase success. The real aspect, though, as we look at this, is where is the one of the things that people say is, I'm doing DevOps, I don't need IT service management, I don't need governance, I don't need compliance, I don't need anything, I just need DevOps. Well, not quite true. Most of you are in organizations today that have security requirements, compliance requirements, governance requirements, and of course you have customers who you have to deliver a service to. One of the things that I see today is that this risk piece, which is on the right of this slide, must be the prevalent decision point for your technology. It's got to be the key discussion point. You've got to understand the risk. Risk is not going away. What do I mean? Well, I'm doing a change to my mobile banking app. Great, no problem. The mobile app goes through a process of being updated, changed, and then maybe it appears on one of the stores, the Google Play or the iTunes store, and goes out to our community. At the back end, you're integrating with your back-end system, so your testing process better includes your back-end systems. But what about if my new mobile app, which is part of my innovation, is just a mortgage app, a mortgage application app? Great. It's net new, it's innovative, it's touching a new area, not so much stringency. So I go and I pop it out there, and yes, my retail banking want that app to go out successfully, by the way. Don't worry about that. But the reality of it is it's independent, and the risk level is lower. So you push it out, and what you'll do is add a base number of functionality points, and then over time you'll upgrade it and update the app. The life cycle of that is going to be different to your main retail banking application. That retail banking application impacts 1.2 billion users, or whatever your account number is, X billion funds under management. The risk becomes high. You're probably going to want to take a different approach to that. But the reality of it is that as the risk goes up, you want to look at the methodology that you use, whether it's DevOps or otherwise. So you end up with a demand and a supply chain. And you cannot actually take these away. So at the governance layer, you've got your demand. And this only becomes clear and easily distinguishable and manageable in an environment where you actually have integration between development and operations. If you have the old style environment where development code talks to the user community, codes it and throws it over the fence, this is not going to work. You're actually going to change your cadence. So what you're going to be doing is hitting those key functions at the top. You're going to have a strategy the organizational has, you're going to have resource capacity, you're going to have priorities, and you're going to have process ownership and compliance and financial. You're going to get demand, and then what you're going to do in your customer engagement is you're going to plan and build, you're going to look for operations excellence, and you're going to deliver continual improvement. This is all about the life cycle of change, the life cycle of development. Now, I go back to the plan, build, run model. And this is an interesting model as you take it forward. So today we plan, build, and run, and we implement in production. Imagine a world where you actually go and look at that, and you actually plan, build, release, and run. In a DevOps environment, that's exactly what you're doing. You're planning, building, you're understanding the release, because the release concerns all aspects, and you're going to promote that to production. Then you're going to run, and there's a feedback loop here which is not there. Now, most people don't do release management very well, and one of the areas that DevOps talks about is release. Because often when you're rolling something out in DevOps, it's hitting multiple components, multiple partners, multiple issues. So what we're going to be doing then is having this continual life cycle where you're going to release and change. Release and change, release and change, release and change. So the focus on release management is not the old-fashioned release where we go and we grab 42,000 different changes, we pop them together and we roll them into production. We're actually going to be looking at a series of changes and releasing them one by one. Now that is very intensive, and in the old way of doing things is not going to work. And that's why we need to do a DevOps management, release and philosophy. So in service management, we need to really change what we're doing. Release management has a different agenda in Ops than PM and AppDev. One of the things I really see is that the mission that we really need to get to is how we focus on production release, how we focus on doing multiple changes a day. I gave an example before about Amazon AWS, who actually deliver 10,000 changes an hour. Imagine you're in a situation where you have to deliver multiple changes an hour or a day. Now, most of us aren't doing multiple changes an hour. Most of us are delivering multiple changes in a period of time. But the reality of it is that we need to think it through. We actually need to understand the elements of it. So release management is going to become critical going forward. But you can't do good release management and you can't do DevOps without good change management. Change management has to be at a mature level, and this is one of the impacts of DevOps on IT service management. You need to look at your change philosophy. You need to transition your change philosophy from the way you might have done it in the past. The old way of doing change management where you have that change, it's entered in, you have your CAB meeting, virtual or physical, you have everybody around the table once a week, we discuss the change, we agree the change, we sign off the change, and by the way, everybody says, no, we can't do it, and then you have a manager who just overrides you and says you're going to have to change anyway. I did change management for several years, and one of the things I knew is if I went to the CAB meeting and the developer had the CIO or the business user in their back pocket, whether we said yes or no, that change was going to production that week. End of story. Well, in a DevOps environment, that change may still go to production, but the reality of it is you're going to put it through the test. So to do good release management and good DevOps, one of the things is you have to have a decent change management process integrated to the back end as well, integrated into your development process as well. So if we look at the ownership of the holistic life cycle, this is one of the things we do in DevOps. We actually make a single team responsible and accountable for every aspect, data and information, and right now information governance is a hot topic. By information governance, I mean we know what the information is that our applications are using and delivering, we know how it's managed, we know the security requirements, and we've gone and architected all of them into our solutions. We've got our infrastructure covered, and we gave a great diagram of instrumenting that earlier before. The application's built, we've got our processes, the system, and we turn it into a service. This becomes a service life cycle, and this is a critical aspect of what we're doing. And the reality of it is in building these teams, we're all one team and we're all driving the value proposition together. So you end up with this kind of model. And I think this is one of the areas, and before I was talking about the fact that you've got the capability of a bimodal IT model. Where you've got high standardization, you've got that type of capability, then you can start delivering things in a formal process made to stock. Now, a car manufacturer, for instance, making the base model. High standardization, made to stock, assembled to order maybe, and it's just delivered one time. There's minimal risk, minimal variance, and you can just do that consistently and continually. Then you've got the area of low standardization, one-offs, unique content. You're building something really neat and different. It's the new car with a different variation. It's got red wheels instead of black. It's not a stock item. You've got to order it from somewhere, and you've really got to drive the capabilities forward. So this is a variance, and you're going to actually do this differently, and you're going to play with the logistics of this. And this type of one-time change where it's totally unique and totally different, you're probably, in a manufacturing environment, going to put this through a specialized process. You need to make these determinations early on. You need to understand what they are. So how do we move forward? And that's one of the things that I want to do here and talk about today. We have to establish a service management office and no longer an incident response office. The big change for DevOps is we can no longer just have a service desk that answers the phone or answers email or answers, web tickets and just fixes things. We need to become part of one team. We need to change the construct of our service management office. And as you look at this, you're going to be having various functions within that as well. And you need to answer the various aspects. You need to do the governance. You need to have your processes. You need to have a CIP, a continual improvement process. And you need to integrate with the development organization. So here's the reality. This is what the future state looks like. And that future state, I mean now. Now what you've got is a situation where you've got a customer, and that customer is dealing with services, and they leverage and use services. Now today in enterprise service delivery, you look at the aspects that we're really covering and delivering, right? So you look at these functions on the left. They're all over the place, and there's loads of them, but they're all critical to the way we deliver. And all of that is actually governed by this wonderful contract called a service level agreement or service level management. It's really interesting. Most of these service level agreements I see are actually not true service level agreements. They're really operational level agreements. If you think about your developer and when they're putting the change together, they're not talking to the business about a service level agreement. That's, server uptime is, number of the transactions is, this is. They're talking about a contract or an agreement that is, we'll deliver this many transactions in this time, we'll deliver this value to the customer, so on and so forth. And that's part of where we need to get to in terms of these overbearing agreements. Now, as you put all these functions together, right, it's still about the service. We're still delivering service. It's still constructed against service level agreement. But the reality of it is that one of the things we're seeing in change today is these changes need to be done consistently and continually. And we can't view these as single entities anymore. We have to pull them all together. So all these functions are going to go within the service management office or whatever you choose to call it. So for those of you, the 80% of you who are not doing DevOps today, who are thinking about DevOps, where do we start and where do we go? It's a really interesting change. We have to start a transformation. Remember, DevOps is not a framework. It's a culture, it's a philosophy, it's a mindset change, it's an organizational change, and we're actually going to start working together as teams. So the first thing we need to do is do some skilling of our people. You're going to actually have to form teams together. You're going to have to cross-skill. You're going to have to actually train your people to do what you do and how you do it. I believe you need to reevaluate and rebuild your service delivery cycle. You need to change the way you deliver your service cycle. You need to focus on building service design packages or DevOps design packages, and you need to build these teams together. Of course, you might need some different technology for DevOps, but before you do that, try it in a small part of the organization. Try a new project or a new piece of innovation or a new mobile app or something you're doing net new in your organization to transition the organization so that you can actually learn and iterate, like I showed you in the slide earlier on. It's really about moving forward. And by the way, the investment you have in IT service management today is not wasted, because you're still going to be doing change. The difference is you're going to be looking to work with your tool set to instrument and automatically update the change as you go through production, because you're still going to want to track that change. You have to track that change. You have to know where it is from an audit perspective. You have to know where it is from a backup perspective. And more importantly, when that user unfortunately has to call the service desk because something's broken, you want to know what changed, because isn't that the first question you always ask? What changed? A good colleague of mine that worked for a large manufacturing company, every time there was a system failure, he would ask the question, what changed? In 80% of service outages, something changed. Nothing is going to change here. You're still going to have outages. You're still going to have failures. You need to know what changed. You still need to write those audit checkpoints. You need to evaluate your new processes that support DevOps. Whether you like it or not, whether you call it DevOps or not, the pressure on you as service managers to deliver more incremental change with a greater velocity is here today. And if it's not in your organization today, it's happening and you're just not seeing it. Because the reality of it is that business is changing, and business is changing fundamentally quickly. So, ask some questions if your organization is prepared to implement DevOps. Now, you may not answer yes to all of these, but you need to think them through as you go forward. First, do you have well-defined responsibility for Dev and Ops? Most of you do. Most of you do have well-defined responsibilities for Dev and operations. The reality of it is, though, they're never really joined. Have you documented your critical processes? Is your change management process well documented? Is it instrumented and automated? For most of you, change management is absolutely documented. It is instrumented and automated? I don't know. It's a question you're going to have to ask yourself. Business case. One of the things is you need to educate management. Now, we talk about business case, but a business case can be simple as management, we want to give you greater velocity. To do that, we want to do this change. It sounds simple, but there's loads of use cases and success stories out there of DevOps today. Take those, leverage those, and use them. And then, of course, you're going to do a skills assessment of your people. Some training may be required. Some skill sets may need to be updated. Some people may move into different roles. It's all about building a team, though. And you want to form a well-balanced team that you can actually leverage and use to pilot DevOps, because your version of DevOps and mine are going to be a bit different. DevOps in a manufacturing organization may look a little bit different to a bank. It may look a little bit different to Amazon. But it's really where you start. And one of the things I tell people, is do you have a critical app that changes a lot, that really doesn't impact your major production systems, that you could be using as an exemplar model or a sample model to start with? Because that's where you want to start, somewhere like that, because it'll really help. But what's the value of integrated DevOps and ITSM? I think it's there. Number one, fast response to your stakeholders. Obvious. I think efficient continuous delivery. You will get higher rates of change success with DevOps. Why do I say that? Because you're reducing the scope and nature of change. You're doing more incremental change than less large change. You are going to be doing smaller pieces or bite sizes, chunks. Now that's really the way we learn. You think about the way we educate our children. Our children learn to walk by crawling or dragging themselves, by standing and holding onto something and taking a step. Then they walk confidently, and then they ultimately run, and then they're totally independent. We need to train and educate and grow our change in the same way. If we do that, we're going to have more success. You look at the way people update mobile apps. They don't build a huge integrated application and deliver it in day one of mobility. They deliver just enough capability, and they implement and update over time. User experience is going to be improved because it's going to be easy to use. And, of course, we'll be seen as the group that are agile. So with that said, I like to use this tool. IT in the old days used to be behind closed doors, locked away, hidden. In fact, I remember when the CIO came down to my dev center, my data center where the change management operation lived one day, going back a few years ago in my history, and the CIO's badge wouldn't let her in the data center. We were locked away and hidden. We need to be open, all of us, open to new ideas, open to the changing world. DevOps is just one of those things coming at us. More is coming, and this will come in a more accelerated path. DevOps is an opportunity for all of you in service management. It's an opportunity for you to take the hard work you've done, the success that you've driven in your organization, and to be really relevant in this new world. This world where change is going to happen at the speed of light. The world where change is going to be a normal thing. And we need to get our people focused on delivering change effectively, and working together in teams to deliver business value. With that said, Roy, let's cross over to use the few minutes left for any questions there might be.
Thanks, Rob. Excellent. Thank you very much for going through that really good, detailed information, and I think very encouraging to those who are embarking on DevOps and have some investment in IT service management in other flavors and might have some questions about that. So we do have some questions, and the first one is, how do organizations find the delicate balance between getting the work done and being mindful of the processes that make for good governance?
That's a statement and a question all in one. You know, it's really interesting. If you go back to the comment on risk-based assessment, you know, one of the things we've seen is in the past, IT used to mitigate all risk. We'd be so focused on 100% availability and, you know, just everything being perfect that we actually lost sight that the business needs to change or implement over time. We need to balance the security, governance, and compliance requirements with and part of the DevOps team. So one of the things I tell people is you need to bring security, compliance, and governance up front in the life cycle, and you need to have that as part of the team. Your DevOps team will include stakeholders from those organizations. And we're starting to see security become something considered up front in this era of cybersecurity. So that's not so hard to do anymore. We're starting to see, you know, the basic governance requirements be built in. You're starting to see internal audit requirements be built into apps today, so that continuous monitoring can be used, so that we don't need to intrude so much with internal audit staff. But it is a balancing act, Roy, as the question states. And that balancing act needs to be just based on risk and a risk assessment. And I believe we need to bring the risk assessment way up front, make it simple to use, and if that risk assessment is leveraged and used, let's iterate that over time as well, so we learn. But, you know, it's a tough one. That's really the $42,000 question here, is how we balance risk versus change.
Thank you. There's a tremendous amount of interest in DevOps now, but there isn't a lot of solid information about what it means specifically to support and how it will help. Can you shed some light on how DevOps might affect the support organization specifically?
Yeah, look, support organizations, we need you. They're critical. And one of the aspects of DevOps that I believe can help support is, as we build DevOps teams, I believe DevOps teams should really include the support representative. And how they help support is that they can actually start to build in the checklist, the FAQs, the questions, the user statements into that. Now, that's from a practical perspective. The other aspect, though, from a DevOps perspective, is as we start to develop user experience and user interfaces that are simpler and easier to use and more intuitive, then we should start to minimize the requirements on support. And the other interesting thing in new technologies that are starting to be developed now and new applications is the ability to go straight to support. And I'm starting to see this more and more in new applications, and my recent banking application is a great example. And my app on my iPhone for the bank that I bank with, right, I can go straight to support now. And that actually now, and I've actually used it, that actually passed the data straight to support with my request of where I was and what I was doing. Imagine how much simpler it is if you actually have a valid user on the phone that's self-identified and you know where they're at, and you don't have to ask 50 questions because you get where they're at. That's going to be really useful. And I think that's one of the areas there. The third thing I want to say to our support people is you're already using, whether you know it or not, DevOps-like methods to solve difficult support problems. Whether you know it or not, you're going through a thought process in your role where you're thinking through in a DevOps way. You're going and identifying the symptoms, you're relating it back to previous incidents. You're almost building a Kanban board in your head, and you're moving the things along. And I think it's really interesting. I actually think DevOps is learning something from some of our better support people as well.
Thanks. We actually did have someone in the chat who said that they are in fact using Kanban for incident management. So pretty interesting, and getting good results. So during the course of your presentation, you used the phrase production-like environment. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I knew I was going to get picked up on that one.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges has been with testing, right through my career, is we test in not production-like environments, right? And I'm not advocating you test in production, but one of the things with DevOps now and virtualization technologies, which has come to the forefront in the last few years, is we can now spin up emulated production environments as part of the testing. And good DevOps organizations actually do that. What they'll do is, as part of the process, when they move code from the unit test to system test, is they will then have a virtual emulation of the production environment spun up that will contain data which has been randomized of the production environment, and then the testing script that they've helped develop against the areas that the change will impact will be leveraged and run to use. And that code won't progress, by the way, until it passes that test. So production-like environment means almost emulated production environment, and it's critical. And I think we have to do that. And by the way, even in waterfall, if we could test in a production-like or production-emulated environment, we get much better results. It's been the holy grail for my time in IT, is to get testing done before we go to production in the production environment so things don't break. But you can't really do it in the production environment, can you? So there's the genesis of that comment.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I hear you there. Trying to get those two environments to match sometimes is a really interesting challenge. Just to ask our last question, we only have a couple of minutes remaining. So what do you have to say to those who think they're bound into one framework like ITIL or nothing, or COBIT or nothing, or, I think you pointed out quite a few places where things intersect today, but just some comments on maybe people who seem like they have to stick with one.
Yeah, look, let me start that comment by I've been attending a series of ISACA meetings this weekend where one of the hot topics has been framework fusion, ironically enough, today's title. And the reality of it is that many of you are leveraging one framework or another, especially within operations. But the reality of it is that across your organization, I will be very sure and confident in saying you have multiple frameworks. Development is not using ITIL to do development. They're using Waterfall or Scrum or Timbuk or Prince2 or something. And your security people aren't using ITIL either. They're probably leveraging or conforming to ISO 27001. So one of the aspects is you within operations or even support may be living in one framework, ITIL or even the HDI standard, or even toothpicks and cherry trees. But the reality of it is, as you go into a DevOps environment and a wider group, you will be leveraging multiple frameworks to deliver that technology and that technology stack. And that's as you open your eyes and see that, you'll see that. But please don't abandon your investment. If you're invested in ITIL for change and release and incident and problem, that's fantastic. In a DevOps world, they're critical, right? They're critical. If you're doing some other service management framework, that's fine too. Leverage the investment you have to get the result you need. You don't need to throw the framework out with the DevOps bathwater.
Great. Thank you so much, Rob. Save the date for April 21st. Our next webinar will be Move Over BYOD, Exploring the Internet of Things. And meanwhile, we'll see you at HDI 2015 in Las Vegas. Thank you for attending.